"I can't breathe," she cried, her voice barely a whisper in the vast emptiness of the prairie. When he lifted the cloth, the rancher's heart stopped cold at the sight that would forever change his understanding of life and death. Nothing in his 30 years working this harsh land had prepared him for what lay beneath that simple piece of fabric. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Colorado Territory, 1876. Rain lashed against the windows of Denver's Grand Palace Hotel, each droplet racing down the glass like tears of warning. Senator John Martin hunched over his mahogany desk, his weathered hands trembling not from age, but from the weight of betrayal that pressed upon his shoulders. The flickering gaslight cast long shadows across his face, deepening the lines of worry etched there over decades of public service. "What you're suggesting, Senator?" Samuel Brown paused, adjusting his spectacles as he processed the information. The young reporter's notebook lay open before him, but his pencil remained still, frozen by the magnitude of the revelations. "I'm not suggesting anything, son," the senator replied, his voice low and grave. "I'm telling you what I know to be true." He spread out several documents, land deeds with signatures that didn't match their supposed authors, correspondence detailing bribes to government officials, maps with territories marked for seizure. Samuel leaned forward, his youthful idealism visibly shaken. "But Colonel Wanderley is considered a hero. The newspapers call him the architect of Western progress." "Progress built on theft and lies?" Martin scoffed, running a hand through his silver hair. "The transcontinental isn't just displacing people, they're destroying lives. The Tupon tribe, the homesteaders, even the townspeople of Villa de Prata, all sacrificed for Wanderley's ambition." Outside, thunder cracked like a rifle shot, making both men flinch. The storm's intensity seemed to mirror the senator's growing agitation as he recounted how Colonel Wanderley had systematically corrupted officials across 3 counties. "My daughter Maria has been helping me gather evidence for months," he continued, glancing nervously at the window. "We've documented everything, every bribe, every forged deed, every broken treaty." With a decisive movement, Senator Martin slid a worn leather portfolio across the polished surface of the desk. "This is proof Transcontinental isn't just building tracks. They're stealing futures. Take it to Governor Hayes immediately." Samuel reached for the portfolio, questions forming on his lips, but before he could speak, the window shattered in an explosive hail of glass. The reporter instinctively ducked as a thunderous crack, distinctly not thunder, echoed through the room. The senator jerked backward, surprise replacing determination on his face. A crimson stain blossomed across his white shirt, spreading with horrifying speed. He clutched at his chest, mouth opening and closing like a fish deprived of water. "Senator!" Samuel cried, rushing to the older man's side as he slumped in his chair. Martin's eyes, already growing distant, fixed on the leather portfolio. His bloodied fingers stretched toward it with desperate urgency, leaving scarlet smears across its surface. "My daughter," he gasped. "Find Maria." Maria Martin's blood froze as the gunshot echoed through the Grand Palace Hotel. Her silk dress rustled against the ornate wallpaper as she rushed toward her father's suite, heart hammering against her ribs. The corridor stretched endlessly before her, each step bringing her closer to a truth she already feared. When she burst through the door, time seemed to slow. Senator John Martin slumped across his mahogany desk, crimson spreading across his white shirt and staining the papers beneath him. His eyes, usually sharp and determined, now held only fading recognition as they found his daughter. "Run," he whispered, the single word carrying his final breath. Maria barely registered Samuel Brown's presence. The young journalist pressed against the wall, face pale with shock. Before she could process the horror before her, the window shattered again. A second bullet splintered the doorframe inches from her head, showering her with wooden fragments. Acting on instinct, she lunged forward, snatching the leather portfolio her father had died protecting. The weight of it felt impossibly heavy in her trembling hands. "Maria, wait!" Samuel called after her, but his voice faded as she fled down the corridor, her boots pounding against the plush carpet. The hotel's rear entrance offered escape into Denver's rain-soaked streets. The downpour immediately drenched her, plastering her golden hair to her face and neck. The cobblestones gleamed treacherously underfoot as she clutched the portfolio to her chest, shielding it from the deluge with her body. Behind her, splashing footsteps pursued, methodical, unhurried, confident. João Pereira, her father's murderer, knew she couldn't outrun him forever. The enforcer's steady pace echoed her racing heartbeat as she darted between buildings, searching desperately for sanctuary. Lightning illuminated the streets in stark flashes, revealing glimpses of her pursuer. Tall, broad-shouldered, his face a mask of cold determination. Maria ducked into an alley, her lungs burning as she forced herself forward, despite the growing stitch in her side. At Denver's outskirts, Providence appeared in the form of a departing supply wagon. Without hesitation, she sprinted alongside it, muscles screaming in protest. With one desperate lunge, she hauled herself over the wooden side, tumbling beneath a heavy canvas tarp among crates and barrels. Maria pressed her face against rough wooden planks, willing her ragged breathing to quiet as the wagon rumbled away from the city. Only then, as the adrenaline began to subside, did she notice the warm wetness spreading across her shoulder. Her fingers came away red in the darkness. A bullet had found her after all. Pain blossomed suddenly, stealing her breath as the wagon bounced over rutted roads, carrying her into the unknown Colorado wilderness. Clutching both her wound and her father's secrets, Maria Martin slipped into merciful unconsciousness beneath the relentless drumming of rain on canvas. 50 miles away from Denver's chaos, Elias Souza stood motionless on his weathered porch, watching lightning slash across the darkening sky. Each flash illuminated the modest boundaries of his ranch in Silver Creek Valley, a small house, a barn, and a storage shed, all standing defiant against the wilderness that surrounded them. At 45, the rancher's face told stories his lips rarely shared. Deep lines carved by sun and hardship, eyes that had witnessed too much death during the war. The storm hadn't yet reached his property, but Elias could feel it approaching. The electric tension in the air, the distant rumble of thunder promising violence. He ran calloused fingers through his graying hair, inhaling the scent of rain-soaked earth and pine. Inside his cabin, he lit the oil lamp and poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a chipped glass. The amber liquid caught the firelight as he settled into his worn leather chair. This nightly ritual had become his anchor, the drink, the crackling flames, and the memories that refused to fade no matter how much whiskey he consumed. The Medal of Honor lay hidden in a wooden box beneath his bed, tarnished with age and regret. He never displayed it. Some debts could never be repaid, some honors never deserved. Tonight felt different. Unease prickled along his spine as he stared into the flames. The usual ghosts of fallen comrades seemed closer, more insistent in their silent accusations. He drained his glass and considered pouring another when a sound caught his attention. Something beyond the growing patter of raindrops on the roof. Elias stood, head tilted, listening. There it came again. Not the wind, not his imagination. A voice, faint but unmistakable, drifting from the direction of his storage shed. "I can't breathe." The words were barely audible above the intensifying downpour. He grabbed his revolver from the mantel, hesitating only long enough to light a lantern. The former soldier had learned long ago that hesitation invited death. Rain began to fall in earnest as he stepped outside, the cold drops striking his face like tiny needles. Lightning flashed again, closer now, illuminating the path to the shed. Mud sucked at his boots as he crossed the yard, lantern held high, weapon ready. "I can't breathe," came the voice again, weaker this time, desperate. Elias paused at the shed door, water streaming from his hat brim. In the years since the war, he'd trained himself to expect danger, to anticipate betrayal. But something in that voice, its raw vulnerability, stirred something he thought long buried: compassion. At first, Elias Souza thought it was just another ghost from his past. The war had left him with plenty: phantom voices that called his name across empty fields, comrades' faces appearing in the shadows of his cabin. He'd learned to ignore them, to drink them away when they grew too persistent. But this voice sounded different, weaker, more desperate. "Please, can't breathe." Elias set down his whiskey glass and listened. The wind howled around the eaves, but beneath it came that faint plea again. Real, present, not from the battlefield of his memories. "Damn it all," he muttered, grabbing his lantern and revolver. The Medal of Honor recipient had faced Confederate artillery with less trepidation than he now felt opening his own door to the raging storm. Rain lashed his face as he stepped outside, the yard transformed into a quagmire. His boots sank ankle-deep with each step, mud sucking at his feet as he made his way toward the storage shed. Lightning illuminated the path in brief, harsh flashes, thunder rolling across the valley seconds later. The shed door protested with a long creak as he pushed it open. The familiar smell of hay, leather, and oil greeted him. His lantern cast dancing shadows across tools hanging on the wall, sacks of grain stacked in one corner, wooden crates in another. "Anyone here?" he called, revolver ready. No answer came, but something caught his eye: movement in the far corner where he kept spare canvas tarps. Approaching cautiously, Elias noticed a dark stain spreading beneath the fabric. He lifted the corner of the canvas with his gun barrel. What he saw made his weathered hand go slack, the revolver dropping to the dirt floor. A woman lay curled beneath, her elegant clothes torn and soaked through. Golden hair, once carefully styled, now matted with mud and something darker: blood. Her blue eyes, glazed with pain, struggled to focus on him. "Maria Martin," Elias whispered in shock, recognizing the senator's daughter from newspaper illustrations. She didn't seem to hear him. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, her shoulder darkened with blood that hadn't yet been washed away by the rain. The rancher knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her neck. Her pulse fluttered weakly against his touch. "Hold on," he said, gently sliding his arms beneath her slight frame. As he lifted her, something fell from inside her jacket, a folded newspaper clipping. Elias glanced at the headline, but didn't need to read it. He already knew what had happened in Denver. The whole territory was talking about Senator Martin's assassination. Now his daughter was here, wounded and dying on his property. Whatever trouble had found her father had followed her to Silver Creek Valley, and straight to Elias's door. Rain hammered against the cabin as Elias Souza shouldered through the doorway, the woman's limp form cradled against his chest. Her blood mingled with rainwater, leaving dark droplets across the wooden floor. With a swift backward kick, he slammed the door against the howling wind and carried her to his bed. "Stay with me," he murmured, laying her down gently. Her golden hair spread across his pillow like a halo, her face deathly pale in the flickering lamplight. The rancher worked quickly, cutting away her sodden jacket with a hunting knife. As the fabric parted, a folded newspaper clipping fluttered to the floor. Elias snatched it up, his weathered hands freezing mid-motion as the headline struck him like a physical blow. "Senator Martin assassinated in Denver." His eyes darted to the unconscious woman's face, recognition dawning. This was Maria Martin, the senator's daughter, the same senator who had once saved him from ruin after the war, who had helped him secure this land when nightmares still woke him screaming. Outside, his horse whinnied nervously in the stable. Elias moved to the window, peering into the storm-tossed darkness, every sense alert for movement. Years of solitude had sharpened his instincts. If she had fled here, pursuers wouldn't be far behind. Returning to Maria's side, he cleaned the angry wound with whiskey and packed it with clean cloth. She flinched at his touch, eyelids fluttering as fevered words spilled from her lips. "The journal, evidence, must reach the governor," she mumbled, fingers clutching at empty air. "They'll kill anyone, everyone." Elias worked methodically, his mind racing. Who had done this to her? Who had murdered John Martin, a man known for his integrity in a territory where such qualities were rare? "Colonel Wanderley," Maria whispered suddenly, her blue eyes opening briefly before closing again. The name hit Elias like ice water. Colonel Wanderley, once his commanding officer, the man who'd pinned the Medal of Honor to his chest. The man who now controlled the Transcontinental Railroad's expansion through Colorado territory with ruthless efficiency. Elias sat back on his heels, a cold dread settling in his stomach. If Wanderley was involved, this wasn't just about one senator's murder. This was something far larger, far darker. He'd heard rumors about land seizures, about treaties broken, about men who disappeared after speaking against the railroad. He glanced at Maria's feverish form. By taking her in, he had just placed himself squarely in the path of the most dangerous man in the territory. A man who had once saved his life on the battlefield, and who now apparently wouldn't hesitate to end it. The first light of dawn painted Silver Creek Valley in hues of amber and gold. But inside Elias's cabin, the battle against death had just begun. Maria Martin's skin burned with fever, her breathing shallow and rapid. Sweat plastered her golden hair to her forehead as infection took hold of her wounded shoulder. Elias Souza worked methodically, grinding dried herbs in a wooden mortar. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, recalling lessons from a Tupac healer who had once saved his life after a hunting accident. The angry red streaks radiating from Maria's wound sent a chill down his spine. During the war, he'd watched strong men die from less, their bodies surrendering to infection before surgeons could remove the affected limbs. "This will hurt," he murmured, applying the pungent paste to her wound. The senator's daughter flinched but remained unconscious, lost in fevered dreams. As he worked, Elias studied her face. She looked younger in sleep, vulnerable in a way that made his protective instincts flare. He'd promised nothing, yet somehow felt responsible for this stranger who'd collapsed in his storage shed. When Maria's eyes finally fluttered open, they were wild with fear. "They'll find me," she gasped, clutching at his arm with surprising strength. "They'll come for the journal." "You're safe here," Elias assured her, though doubt gnawed at his certainty. "No one knows you're here. You don't understand." Her voice cracked. "Colonel Wanderley has men everywhere. They killed my father. They'll kill anyone who stands in their way." The name hit Elias like a physical blow. Wanderley had been his commanding officer, a man he'd respected, even admired. The colonel had pulled him from the jaws of death at Gettysburg, had recommended him for the Medal of Honor that now lay hidden in a wooden box beneath his bed. "Wanderley?" he repeated, disbelief coloring his voice. "The same man who now runs Transcontinental Railroad?" Maria nodded weakly. "He orchestrated everything, the land thefts, the bribes, the broken treaties. My father discovered it all." Her fingers tightened around his wrist. "It's all in the journal." As she drifted back into uneasy sleep, Elias sat beside her, his mind racing. Could the honorable officer he'd known become a murderer, a thief? The possibility seemed impossible, yet the wounded woman before him had no reason to lie. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across his land. Elias watched the tree line, suddenly aware of how exposed his ranch was, how easily found. If Wanderley truly wanted this woman silenced, nowhere would be safe for long. In that moment, Elias made his decision. He would protect Maria, even if it meant standing against the man who'd once saved his life. Some debts ran deeper than loyalty to a fallen hero. Boot prints circled the cabin like predators stalking prey. at least 3 distinct sets. Elias Souza knelt by the door, fingers tracing the impressions in the mud. These weren't random travelers seeking shelter. They moved with purpose, studying the perimeter of his home. Inside, he loaded his rifles methodically, muscle memory from years of war guiding his hands. The familiar weight of the weapons brought little comfort as he positioned a wooden chair by the window, settling in for a long watch. Rain lashed against the glass, distorting his view of the yard. But his eyes remained fixed on the shadows beyond. "No, please, Father." Maria Martin's feverish murmurs drifted from the bed. She clutched the leather portfolio to her chest even in sleep, fingers white-knuckled around its edges. The senator's daughter tossed restlessly, trapped in nightmares that mirrored reality too closely. Elias watched her for a moment, wondering what horrors played behind her closed eyelids. Outside, the wind howled with eerie familiarity. It reminded him of Gettysburg, that same mournful wail that had swept across blood-soaked fields, carrying the cries of dying men. He shivered despite himself. "Water," he offered when Maria finally opened her eyes, helping her sit upright. Her fever had broken slightly, clarity returning to her gaze as she studied his face. "I know you," she whispered, voice hoarse. "You were in my father's study, a photograph on his desk." Elias stiffened. "Your father and I never met. But he knew you." Maria's blue eyes held his. The Medal of Honor recipient who defied orders to save innocent lives. The only honest man in Wanderley's command. Something cold settled in Elias's stomach. "Your father kept track of me?" "He admired you." She winced, adjusting her position. "Said if more men had your courage, Colorado wouldn't be drowning in corruption." With trembling hands, Maria reached inside her jacket, revealing stitching along the lining. She carefully tore the threads, extracting several folded papers covered in what appeared to be nonsensical markings. "It's coded," she explained, spreading the pages on the blanket. "My father's journal. Every transaction, every bribe, every broken treaty with the Tupa. Names, dates, locations." Her voice broke. "This is what they killed him for. What João Pereira murdered him for," while I listened from the hallway. Elias studied the coded pages, understanding washing over him. This could destroy Wanderley. "It will," Maria whispered, determination hardening her features. "If we survive long enough to use it." "The man who killed my father is João Pereira," Maria whispered, her blue eyes darkening with memory. "Wanderley's personal enforcer. I saw his face clearly when he fired the shot." Elias Souza's weathered hands tightened around his coffee mug. The name was familiar. Pereira had been one of Wanderley's most loyal men, even during the war, a mercenary who followed orders without question. "He's tracked me from Denver," she continued, wincing as she shifted her bandaged shoulder. "I spotted him twice on the road. He won't stop until he has the journal." "You won't face him alone," Elias promised, his voice low and steady. The irony wasn't lost on him. Standing against Wanderley meant opposing the very man who had dragged him, bleeding and half dead, from a Confederate artillery barrage at Gettysburg. Maria studied his face. "Why would you risk everything for me? For this?" She gestured toward the leather portfolio. Elias moved to the window, scanning the property with practiced vigilance. "Your father was more than just a senator to me." He paused, memories washing over him like the rain still dripping from the eaves. "After the war, I was lost, drinking too much, fighting anyone who looked at me wrong." He turned back to face her. "I assaulted a railroad man who was threatening a widow's land. Could have hanged for it. But your father, Judge Martin then, saw something worth saving, gave me a second chance, helped me secure this land." Understanding dawned in Maria's eyes. "That's why Papa trusted you. He never mentioned your name, but he kept your Medal of Honor citation in his study." "I've repaid some of that debt by working this ranch honestly," Elias said. "But the true repayment comes now." Maria attempted to stand, determination overcoming pain. We need to leave before Pereira finds us. I have contacts in Vila de Prata who can help get this evidence to the governor. Elias helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. There's a mountain trail. Difficult terrain, but Wanderley's men won't expect it. They worked quickly, gathering supplies. Food, medicine, ammunition. Elias packed his most reliable rifle and revolver, while Maria carefully secured the journal inside her jacket. The rancher instructed her on emergency signals and meeting points should they become separated. As they prepared to slip out the back door toward the stables, sunlight glinted off something metal near the barn. Elias froze, pushing Maria gently behind him. "What is it?" she whispered, tension evident in every line of her body. "Someone's here," he murmured, reaching slowly for his weapon. The flash of a spyglass or a rifle scope. Their time had run out. Pereira had found them. The lone rider emerged from the mist like a specter, his silhouette growing more defined as he approached the cabin. Elias Souza recognized him immediately. João Pereira, Wanderley's most feared enforcer. His stomach tightened with dread as he watched the man who had tracked Maria across 50 miles of wilderness. "Souza, I know you're in there. Hand over the girl and what she stole," Pereira called out, his voice carrying across the yard with chilling authority. His horse pawed at the muddy ground, sensing its rider's tension. Elias's grip tightened on his rifle, knuckles whitening. Behind him, Maria Martin stood in the doorway, her face ashen but her stance unwavering. Despite her wound and fever, determination radiated from her like heat. "That's him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The man who shot my father. I saw his face when he pulled the trigger." The rancher nodded grimly. He'd suspected as much, but hearing confirmation hardened his resolve. He stepped onto the porch, rifle visible but not aimed. "What business brings you to my property, Pereira?" Elias called, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. The enforcer smiled coldly. "Just following orders, same as the old days. The colonel sends his regards." He shifted in his saddle, revealing a holstered revolver at his hip. "The girl has something that doesn't belong to her. Return it, and perhaps we can all walk away from this unharmed." "The journal belongs to her father," Elias replied. "And last I checked, stealing from the dead is still theft." Pereira's smile vanished. "The colonel reminds you of your debt to him. Gettysburg, the field hospital. You wouldn't be standing here without his intervention." A flash of memory, blood-soaked bandages, screaming men, Wanderley arranging medical care when others had been left to die. The old debt hung heavy in the air between them. "Any debt I owed Wanderley ended the moment he sanctioned murder," Elias declared, his voice carrying across the yard. "Senator Martin was a good man." The enforcer's face hardened. "Your choice is made, then." He turned his horse, but his parting words carried a deadly promise. "At sundown, I return, and not alone. The colonel has hired mercenaries who don't share your principles, even corrupted some Tupa scouts to track you if you run." As Pereira disappeared into the mist, Elias turned to Maria, whose blue eyes reflected both fear and resolve. "We have until sundown," she said quietly. Elias nodded, already calculating their slim chances. "Then we better not waste a minute." The storm's fury had spent itself by dawn, leaving behind a sky washed clean of clouds. Elias Souza moved with practiced efficiency, packing only what they couldn't survive without: dried meat, bandages, ammunition, and a small pouch of medicinal herbs Flor Selvagem had once taught him to recognize. "I can ride," Maria Martin insisted, her voice stronger than her body suggested. She stood shakily by the cabin door, one hand pressed against her wounded shoulder, the other clutching the leather portfolio containing her father's journal. Elias studied her pale face, noting the determination that burned behind the fever in her eyes. "It'll be rough going," he warned, but didn't argue further. Time wasn't their ally. They took the Eastern Trail, a narrow path that wound through pine forests and rocky outcroppings. The main roads would be watched. Colonel Wanderley was too thorough to leave such obvious routes unguarded. Their destination was Villa de Prada, where allies might still be found, but the journey would take them through some of Colorado's most unforgiving terrain. The cold bit through their clothing as they climbed higher into the mountains. Maria swayed in her saddle, occasionally closing her eyes as waves of pain washed over her. The rancher rode close, ready to catch her if she fell. During one particularly steep ascent, he reached across to steady her, his weathered hand gentle against her arm. "My father trusted you," she murmured, half delirious. "Said you were the only man who stood against Wanderley when it mattered." By midday, they reached a secluded plateau, sheltered by towering granite formations. Elias helped Maria dismount, settling her against a sun-warmed rock while he examined her wound. The angry red lines had receded slightly, a good sign, but her skin still burned with fever. As he applied a fresh poultice, Maria opened the journal, her fingers trembling as she turned pages covered in her father's meticulous handwriting. "There's more here than just land theft," she said. "Wanderley bribed 3 judges and the territorial commissioner. He's promised Governor Harrison a Senate seat in exchange for looking the other way." She turned another page, wincing as the movement pulled at her injury. The Tupon were promised protection of their ancestral hunting grounds. Instead, Wanderley plans to drive them off, then blame them for any violence that follows. He'll use it as an excuse for military intervention. Elias's jaw tightened. He'd seen such tactics before, creating enemies where none existed, manufacturing reasons for bloodshed. "Your father was a brave man," he said quietly, "to stand against this." Maria looked up, her blue eyes suddenly clear. "And now we carry his fight," she replied. "If we fail, Wanderley wins everything." The horses nickered nervously, sensing their riders' tension. In the distance, a hawk circled against the endless Colorado sky, free in ways they could only envy. The stench of smoke hit them first. Elias Souza pulled his horse to a halt, raising one hand to signal Maria to stop behind him. What had once been a thriving homestead lay in ruins before them. 3 cabins reduced to charred timber, barn doors hanging from broken hinges, and livestock carcasses dotting the muddy yard. "Wanderley's men," Elias muttered, his weathered face hardening as he dismounted. He'd seen this pattern before, the methodical destruction, the calculated cruelty. This wasn't random violence. It was a message written in ash and blood. Maria Martin slid carefully from her horse, wincing as the movement pulled at her bandaged wound. "How can you be sure?" she asked, though the answer was evident in the grim set of her companion's jaw. "The colonel leaves signatures," he replied, pointing to a broken wagon wheel positioned upright in the center of the yard. His warning to other homesteaders who won't sell. They moved cautiously through the devastation, weapons ready. The bodies they found told a terrible story, a family executed for the crime of refusing to surrender their land to Transcontinental's expansion. Elias knelt beside a gray-haired man sprawled near what remained of the main cabin, checking for any sign of life, though he expected none. A faint sound stopped them both, a whimper, barely audible, coming from beneath the ground. Elias located a root cellar door, partially hidden by debris. When he pulled it open, 5 pairs of terrified eyes stared back at him from the darkness below. "It's all right," Maria said softly, holstering her firearm and kneeling despite her pain. "We won't hurt you." The children, ranging from perhaps 4 to 12 years old, huddled together, faces streaked with dirt and tears. The oldest, a boy with his father's determined chin, clutched a kitchen knife with trembling hands. "They came at dawn," he whispered. "Pa told us to hide and not come out no matter what we heard." While Maria coaxed the children from their hiding place, Elias returned to the man he'd checked earlier. To his surprise, the homesteader still clung to life, though blood bubbled at his lips with each shallow breath. "My children," the dying man gasped, clutching Elias's sleeve. "They're alive," Elias assured him. "They stayed hidden, just as you told them." Relief flooded the man's eyes. With his remaining strength, he pressed something into Elias's palm, a tarnished pocket watch. "Promise, keep them safe." "I promise," Elias said, the weight of this new responsibility settling on his shoulders alongside all the others. As they prepared to leave, Maria's face showed a new determination that transcended her physical pain. "This isn't just about my father anymore," she said, helping the smallest child onto her horse. "It's about everyone Wanderley has destroyed." Elias nodded grimly. Every mile forward now carried not just their lives, but the futures of 5 innocent children, and the weight of a promise he intended to keep. The children slowed their pace considerably. 2 of the younger ones rode double with Elias and Maria, while the 3 older children struggled along on foot, their small legs already weary from miles of travel. Elias Souza calculated their progress with growing concern. At this rate, they wouldn't reach Vila da Prata until well after dark, dangerous timing when being hunted. "We need to find shelter before nightfall," he told Maria, his voice low enough that the children couldn't hear. "These mountains get treacherous in darkness." Maria Martin nodded, her face still pale from fever, though her eyes remained alert. The leather portfolio containing her father's evidence stayed secured inside her jacket, close to her heart. As they crossed a shallow stream, Elias suddenly raised his hand, signaling for silence. Through the trees, perhaps half a mile back, riders moved in their direction, at least 6 of them. Even at this distance, he recognized the distinctive hat of João Pereira among them. More concerning were the 2 figures flanking Wanderley's enforcer. Tupan scouts wearing red bandanas, their tracking skills legendary in these mountains. "They've found our trail," Maria whispered, instinctively pulling one of the children closer. Elias surveyed their options. The path ahead offered little cover, and with exhausted children, outrunning the pursuers was impossible. His weathered face hardened with resolve as he made his decision. "We need to change course," he announced, turning his horse northeast. "There's a Tupan settlement beyond that ridge. Chief Noite Clara leads them." Maria's expression shifted to alarm. "The Tupan? But those scouts with Pereira." "Corrupted by Wanderley's gold," Elias interrupted. "But Noite Clara's people are different. Years back, during a militia raid, I disobeyed orders and helped evacuate their women and children before the attack. Wanderley never knew it was me." The rancher's eyes grew distant with memory. "I led them through the night to safety while my unit slept. They called me Soldado Fantasma after that, the ghost soldier." "And you think this chief will remember a debt from years ago?" Maria asked skeptically. Elias adjusted the frightened child in front of him. "The Tupa never forget debts, good or bad. It's our only chance." As they changed direction, Maria watched the former soldiers' confident handling of their desperate situation. Despite her reservations, she found herself trusting his judgment. The 5 orphaned children, unaware of the danger closing in, followed without question, already looking to Elias as their protector. "If you're wrong about this, Chief," Maria said quietly, "we're delivering these children straight to Wanderley." Elias met her gaze. "If I'm wrong, I'll die before I let that happen." The hollow offered little shelter from the biting mountain air. Elias Souza arranged pine branches to create a windbreak, his weathered hands working methodically while keeping one eye on Maria Martin. Her face, usually animated with determination, now flushed crimson with fever. The infection had taken firm hold despite his best efforts. "You need to drink," he urged, supporting her head as she sipped water from his canteen. The children huddled together nearby, exhausted but vigilant, their young eyes haunted by memories of their destroyed settlement. Maria's fingers clutched weakly at the journal hidden beneath her jacket. "If they catch us," she whispered. "They won't," Elias replied, though uncertainty gnawed at him. He applied a fresh poultice to her wound, wincing at her sharp intake of breath. As night deepened, Maria's fever dreams made her restless. Between moments of lucidity, Elias shared stories of the past, particularly of Colonel Wanderley. "He wasn't always the monster you know," the rancher explained, voice low to avoid waking the children. "During the war, he saved countless lives, mine included. Men followed him willingly, believed in him." Maria's eyes fluttered open. What changed him? Power, ambition. Elias stared into the small, carefully shielded fire. After the war, the railroad offered him everything he'd never had. Gradually, people became obstacles rather than souls to protect. Land became commodity, not heritage. He paused, remembering. The man who once risked his life to save a private became someone who would order a family killed for refusing to sell their home. When Maria finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Elias took position at the edge of their camp, rifle across his knees. The night stretched endlessly, punctuated by the soft crying of the youngest child and the distant howl of wolves. Near midnight, his instincts flared. Something had changed in the forest's rhythm. Elias raised his weapon, eyes straining against darkness. Then he saw them, 5 shadows materializing like spirits between the trees. Tupaw warriors, moving with the silence of predators, war paint stark against their skin. His heart hammered against his ribs. They'd found them. But how? Had someone from the destroyed settlement betrayed their direction? Slowly, Elias stood, keeping his rifle lowered but ready. He stepped forward, placing himself between the warriors and the sleeping children and Maria. "Nayara ete," he spoke in their language, words rusty from disuse. "I am Soldado Fantasma." The lead warrior froze, recognition flickering across his face. The ghost soldier, the white man who had once stood between Tupa women and children and the rifles of his own commanders. A debt remembered across years and mountains. The Tupa warriors led Elias, Maria, and the children through a maze of hidden mountain paths. Dusk had fallen by the time they reached the village, nestled in a valley protected by towering pines and natural rock formations. Chief Noit Clara stood at the entrance, his weathered face showing recognition as Elias approached. "Soldado Fantasma," the chief said, using the name the tribe had given Elias years ago. "The spirits told me you would return someday." Elias Souza bowed his head respectfully. "I bring those who need sanctuary, old friend." The chief's eyes moved to Maria Martin, who could barely stand, then to the 5 frightened children. With a single nod, he welcomed them into the village. Women emerged from wooden dwellings, guiding the exhausted travelers to a large communal hut. Inside, Flor Selvagem, the tribe's healer, immediately attended to Maria. The woman's skilled hands cleaned the infected wound with a poultice of crushed leaves and roots. She sang softly as she worked, her prayers mingling with the smoke from healing herbs burning nearby. "The poison runs deep," the healer told Elias, her face grave. "But her spirit fights. She will live." The children were taken to another hut, where they received warm blankets and bowls of venison stew. For the first time since the attack on their settlement, they slept without fear, curled together like wolf pups. Later that night, Chief Noit Clara invited Elias to the council fire. The flames illuminated their faces as the chief spoke of troubling developments. "The railroad man offers rifles to any warrior who brings him the woman and her papers," he said, poking the embers with a stick. 10 guns for the journal alone, 20 for both. Elias's jaw tightened. "Has anyone taken this offer?" 3 young men left 2 days ago, the chief admitted. "They believe Wanderley's promises of protection for our hunting grounds." He shook his head. "The young forget old betrayals too quickly." "We've put your people in danger," Elias said. Noit Clara gazed into the fire. "The railroad man's web stretches far. Even here, we feel its threads." He placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. "You must leave soon, before the web tightens. I can offer you 2 days of rest, no more." Elias nodded, understanding the impossible position his arrival had created. The tribe's safety hung in balance against their ancient code of hospitality. When the woman can travel, the chief continued, my son will guide you through the caves beneath Thunder Mountain. They lead to the valley beyond Wanderley's scouts. Thank you, Elias said, his voice thick with gratitude. The chief's eyes reflected the dancing flames. Old debts between us are now paid, but new dangers await you beyond our protection. For 3 days, Maria Martin drifted between fever dreams and painful consciousness under the watchful eyes of Elias and the Tupa healer. Flor Selvagem worked tirelessly, applying poultices of crushed herbs and chanting ancient prayers over the wounded woman. The infection that had threatened to claim Maria's life gradually retreated, leaving her weak but alert. The spirits favor you, Flor remarked one morning, changing Maria's bandages with practiced hands. Many would have surrendered to such a wound. The Tupa village had become their sanctuary, though Elias knew it was temporary. Children played near their lodge, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension that hung in the air. The 5 orphans they'd rescued had found comfort among the tribe's families, their nightmares slowly giving way to cautious smiles. As Maria's strength returned, she devoted herself to deciphering more of her father's journal. Sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, she pored over the coded pages, occasionally calling Elias over to confirm a name or location. It's worse than we thought, she whispered one evening, her face illuminated by firelight. Wanderley isn't just stealing land. He's planning to eliminate entire settlements that refuse to sell. Her finger traced a line of text. My father documented meetings where they discussed framing the Tupan for attacks on homesteaders. Elias's jaw tightened. To justify military action against the tribes. And clear the path for the railroad, Maria added, her blue eyes hardening with resolve. Outside their lodge, life in the village continued. Women grinding corn, warriors training young boys, elders telling stories around communal fires. Elias watched them with growing unease, knowing their presence put every soul at risk. Chief Noiclara sensed his concern. One evening, the tribal leader approached Elias as he stood guard at the village perimeter. Your enemies draw closer, the chief said, his weathered face solemn in the twilight. My scouts report many men in the foothills. Elias nodded. We'll leave at first light. You've risked enough for us. The Wanderley man offers rifles to any Tupa who brings him the woman and the writings, Noiclara continued. Some young men from other bands have accepted. Before dawn, the alarm came. Wanderley's men had surrounded the valley, their torches visible on the ridgelines. A messenger arrived, demanding Maria's surrender. As warriors prepared for battle, the chief led Elias to a hidden crevice behind the village. These caves run through the mountain, he explained, showing Elias a narrow opening in the rock face. My grandfather's grandfather used them to escape soldiers long ago. Elias clasped the chief's arm in gratitude. I won't forget this debt. Noiclara's expression remained grave. Some debts can never be repaid. Go now, before the mountain drinks more blood. The Tupa scouts led the way through the mountain caves, their footsteps barely audible against the stone floor. Elias Souza kept his rifle ready, eyes constantly scanning the shadows while Maria Martin followed behind, her face pale but determined as she guided the 5 children. The narrow passages twisted deeper into the mountain, illuminated only by the scouts' small torches. Stay close, Elias whispered, the words echoing slightly against the damp walls. The air grew colder as they descended, carrying the metallic scent of mineral deposits and underground water. Suddenly, the lead scout froze, raising his hand in warning. The group halted, and in the silence, Elias heard it, the unmistakable sound of a revolver being cocked. Before he could react, torches flared ahead, revealing Colonel Wanderley standing in a wider chamber, flanked by 4 Tupa mercenaries with rifles trained on them. I always knew you'd come this way, Wanderley said, his voice eerily calm in the cavernous space. Predictable, even after all these years. Elias positioned himself between Maria and the colonel, The rancher's face hardened as he recognized men from the tribe who had chosen money over loyalty to Chief Noite Clara. "Let the children pass," Elias demanded, his voice steady despite the tension crackling between them. Wanderley stepped forward, his expensive boots scraping against the stone. "You know what I want, Souza. The girl and that journal. Give them to me, and I'll consider our debts from Gettysburg settled. You saved my life once. I'm offering to save yours now." Maria clutched the leather portfolio tighter to her chest, her blue eyes flashing with defiance. "My father died for this truth," she said, her voice echoing through the cavern. "Your father was a fool who didn't understand progress," Wanderley spat. "Progress built on stolen land and broken promises isn't progress at all," Elias replied. "Any debt I owed you ended when you ordered Senator Martin's murder." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the cave. Then Wanderley sighed. "I truly regretted it would come to this." The first shot came from one of the mercenaries. Chaos erupted as bullets ricocheted off stone walls. Elias fired back, the muzzle flash temporarily blinding everyone in the darkness. He shouted to Maria, pointing toward a narrow fissure in the rock wall barely visible in the torchlight. "Take them through there. I'll hold them off." Maria didn't hesitate. She gathered the terrified children and squeezed through the opening. Elias provided covering fire, the deafening gunshots amplified by the enclosed space. Blood sprayed across the cave wall as one of Wanderley's men fell. Through the gun smoke, Elias caught a final glimpse of Maria helping the last child through the fissure, before he turned back to face his former commander, determined that this time justice would prevail over loyalty. Daylight stabbed through the cave opening, revealing a scene of chaos. The Tupa village burned, warriors locked in desperate combat with Wanderley's men. Women clutched children to their chests as they fled toward the forest, their screams piercing the morning air. Maria Martin stumbled forward, the leather portfolio still clutched against her side. Her fever had barely receded, but determination burned brighter than infection in her eyes. Elias Souza grabbed her arm, pulling her back as bullets splintered the rock beside them. "We can't just watch," she whispered, voice hoarse. Ahead, João Pereira and Hawkins blocked the only escape path, rifles raised. The mercenaries scanned the tree line methodically, their expressions cold and calculating. Behind them, 5 terrified children huddled with the Tupa scouts who had guided them through the caves. "Take the children and circle west," Elias ordered the scouts in their language. "We'll create a diversion." Maria nodded, understanding his plan without words. The bond forged through days of danger had made them intuitive partners. She checked the revolver Elias had given her, hands steadier than they had any right to be. "Ready?" the rancher asked, loading his rifle with practiced efficiency. "For my father," she replied. They burst from cover together, Elias firing 3 rapid shots that sent Wanderley's men diving for protection. Maria aimed at Pereira, the man who had murdered her father in cold blood. Her first shot went wide, but her second caught him in the shoulder, spinning him backward. Hawkins returned fire, bullets kicking up dirt at their feet. Elias pushed Maria behind a fallen tree, then rolled to a new position, drawing the attacker's attention. The former soldier moved with the precision that had once earned him the Medal of Honor, each shot calculated and deadly. "The children!" Maria shouted, seeing the scouts leading them through the chaos toward the forest edge. Elias nodded, providing covering fire as the small group disappeared into the trees. 3 of Wanderley's men pursued them, but well-placed shots from Elias's rifle dropped 2. The third hesitated, then retreated. Victory flashed briefly in Maria's eyes before fading. She swayed, the revolver suddenly too heavy in her hand. The adrenaline that had sustained her drained away, leaving only weakness and pain. Her wound throbbed with renewed vengeance, infection and exhaustion claiming their due. "Elias," she whispered, reaching for him as darkness crowded her vision. He caught her as she collapsed, the portfolio still clutched in her fingers. Cradling her against his chest, Elias looked desperately around the battlefield. Pereira was being dragged away by his men, but more would come. They needed shelter, medicine, and time they didn't have. With Maria unconscious in his arms, the rancher made a desperate choice and headed into the forest, away from both friend and foe. Elias staggered through the dense forest, Maria's limp body cradled against his chest. Her fever burned through her clothes, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The wound was worsening despite the Tupa healer's efforts. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandage, staining his already dirt-covered shirt. "Stay with me," he whispered, pushing through a thicket of brambles. The sound of pursuit had faded, but Elias knew Wanderley's men would regroup soon. As dusk settled over the trees, a faint light flickered between the pines. Elias approached cautiously, his hand hovering near his revolver. A small cabin materialized, smoke curling from its chimney. With no other options, he kicked at the door with his boot. An elderly man with silver hair and spectacles opened it, eyes widening at the sight before him. "Good Lord!" he exclaimed, quickly ushering them inside. "Put her on the table." Antonio Mendez worked with practiced efficiency, cutting away the soiled bandage to reveal the angry, inflamed wound. "Senator Martin's daughter," he murmured, recognition dawning in his eyes. "I treated her father for gout last winter." "You know her?" Elias asked, suspicion edging his voice. The doctor nodded, mixing a tincture of herbs. "More importantly, I know what she carries." He glanced meaningfully at Maria's jacket. "I've been gathering evidence against Wanderley for years, working from the inside, treating his men while documenting their crimes." Maria stirred, her blue eyes fluttering open. "Can we trust him?" she whispered to Elias. "He saved my leg at Antietam," Mendez said, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a familiar regiment tattoo. "Union Field Surgeon, 2nd Corps. Your protector here carried 3 wounded men to safety under Confederate fire." Elias relaxed slightly, watching as the doctor cleaned and redressed Maria's wound. By morning, her fever had broken. The 3 huddled around Mendez's table, poring over maps by lamplight. "The telegraph in Villa da Prata is our only chance," the doctor explained, tracing the route with a weathered finger. "Send the journal's contents to the governor before Wanderley can intercept." Maria nodded, strength returning to her voice. "My father coded the most damning evidence. Names, dates, bribes, everything needed to bring down Wanderley's empire." "The town is crawling with his men," Elias warned, studying the map. "We'd be walking into a trap." Mendez smiled thinly. "Not if we use the tunnels. Built during the Silver Rush, they connect the church to the bank and emerge behind the telegraph office. Donna Marta operates the telegraph. She lost her husband to Wanderley's schemes. She'll help us." As dawn approached, Maria studied the journal one last time. "We'll need a diversion," she said. "Something to draw attention while we send the message." Elias nodded grimly. "I'll give them something to chase." He checked his revolver, determination hardening his features. "Tomorrow we end this." Darkness cloaked Villa da Prata as Maria Martin, Elias Souza, and Dr. Antonio Mendez crept through the town's shadowed streets. They moved like ghosts, guided by Donna Marta, the telegraph operator whose weathered hands had tapped messages across Colorado territory for 20 years. "The tunnels were built during the Silver Rush," Marta whispered, leading them beneath the white-steepled church. Miners feared bandits would steal their shipments. Samuel Brown waited at the tunnel entrance, his journalist's notebook tucked safely inside his coat. "Wanderley's men are patrolling Main Street," he warned, "but Reverend Silvera has created a distraction at the saloon." The underground passage smelled of damp earth and forgotten prayers. Maria clutched the leather portfolio containing her father's journal, her shoulder wound still tender despite Flor Salvagem's healing herbs. The evidence within those pages carried the weight of her father's blood. "The telegraph office connects to the bank tunnel," Donna Marta explained, unlocking a rusted door. "We'll have 5 minutes at most before they realize something's happening." Inside the cramped telegraph office, Maria's fingers trembled as she decoded the journal's most damning passages. The doctor stood watch while Marta's practiced hands tapped out the message to the governor. Evidence of Wanderley's land theft, broken treaties, and the murder of Senator John Martin. A gunshot cracked the night air. Through the window, they spotted Elias on the rooftop of the Mercantile, Hawkins in pursuit. The rancher had volunteered to draw attention away from their mission. "Go," Elias had told Maria earlier, pressing his revolver into her hands. "I'll give them something to chase." Now he leapt between buildings, drawing Wanderley's men away from the telegraph office. Hawkins fired again, the bullet splintering wood inches from Elias's head. The former soldier rolled behind a chimney, using every skill learned in war to stay alive. "Message sent," Marta announced, her voice tight with urgency. "We must leave now." They slipped back into the tunnels as boots thundered overhead. Wanderley's enforcers swarmed across rooftops in pursuit of Elias, oblivious to the real victory occurring beneath their feet. In the town square, as the first light of dawn painted the mountains gold, horses approached from the east. Captain Jaime, Marta's son, led a column of militia and Tupan warriors. The telegraph had worked faster than anyone expected. "Colonel Wanderley," Jaime's voice rang across the square. "By order of the governor, you are under arrest for the murder of Senator Martin and conspiracy against the United States government." Wanderley stood frozen on the boardwalk, his empire crumbling before his eyes. As the militia surrounded him, his gaze found Maria emerging from the shadows. Her father's journal held high like a torch of justice. "This isn't over," Wanderley snarled as Captain Jaime bound his wrists. "You're right," Maria replied, her voice steady at last. "Justice is just beginning." Colonel Wanderley's empire collapsed like a house of cards in the harsh light of truth. The telegram Maria Martin had sent reached Washington within hours, and federal marshals descended upon Villa de Prata by week's end. In the courthouse, Maria stood tall despite her still-healing wound, her testimony unwavering as she presented her father's journal, the blood-soaked pages revealing a conspiracy that stretched from Denver to the nation's capital. "My father died for this truth," she declared, her voice carrying throughout the packed room. The evidence was damning: forged deeds, bribed officials, and planned massacres of those who refused to surrender their land. The Transcontinental Railroad's illegal expansion crumbled under scrutiny. Elias Souza watched from the back, his weathered face revealing little emotion as Wanderley was sentenced. The former colonel, once his commanding officer, refused to meet his gaze as he was led away in chains. João Pereira had not survived to face justice. His final confrontation with Elias in the church bell tower had ended with him falling to his death in the town square. By summer's end, justice had taken root. The government honored the treaties with the Tupan tribe, returning stolen lands under Chief Noite Clara's stewardship. The 5 children rescued from the burned settlement found new homes, 2 with Samuel Brown and his wife in Denver, 3 with Tupan families who welcomed them as their own. "You should be proud," Antonio Mendez told Elias as they shared whiskey on the doctor's porch. "The governor wants you as special marshal for the territory." The rancher considered the offer, surprised to find himself drawn to a purpose beyond his solitary existence. When Maria accepted her position as special advisor to the governor on indigenous affairs, his decision became clear. They built a new home together on the edge of Silver Creek Valley, a place where Elias's ranch had once stood alone. The cabin was larger now, with a wide porch facing the mountains where Flor Selvagem and other Tupan friends would visit, bringing herbs and stories. Dona Marta and her son Captain Jamie became regular guests, as did Samuel Brown, who documented their story in a series that shocked the nation and launched his career at the New York Times. One spring evening, as wildflowers painted the valley in vibrant colors, Elias and Maria stood together watching the sunset. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining with comfortable familiarity. Everyone deserves a final breath, he whispered, remembering how he'd found her that stormy night, barely breathing beneath the tarp. A chance at justice. Maria squeezed his hand, her blue eyes reflecting the fading light. Now, she said, our journey truly begins.